Ladies and gentlemen, let's talk Charlotte, the new 4-star coming in 4.2, who is in fact a cryo catalyst character with very decent cryo application and a fair bit of healing that scales with attack percentage. This character is going to be an absolute unit in this video. We're going to talk about everything to do with her: skill, elemental burst, constellations, passives, this, that, gears, artifacts, all the good stuff that we want to know. Let's jump right into the video. Starting off with the elemental skill, Charlotte's elemental skill can be easily summarized as very similar, almost exactly the same as Nahida's elemental skill, where it has a tap mode and a hold mode that usually will bring up a camera-like apparatus. Taking a look at the tap mode, you will use the camera and deal AoE cryo damage to opponents in front and apply a snappy silhouette to a maximum of 5 opponents, and then during this effect's duration, it will deal cryo damage to affected opponents at intervals. So we already have our fairly great cryo application mechanic here. But then going into the hold, because it does actually have an extra mechanic here, you'll do the classic thing of go press the hold button, you'll bring up a camera lens, and you'll have to aim around and, select certain enemies. This is kind of how the hold works, but the added part is that this will deal cryo damage to all opponents locked on within the viewfinder and apply the same snappy silhouette as the tap mode. But if you unleash this ability only after reaching the finisher frame, you will instead apply focused impression, which lasts longer and deals more damage. But on the other side, it does make the cooldown of the skill a fair bit longer. That is kind of the summarized version of it. Your tap is the weaker version, where you can only get snappy silhouette, whilst the hold is the stronger version. You'll get more damage, longer duration, and generally speaking, more value. Taking a look at the numbers though, it's pretty much encouraged to try to get the focused impression application, which is kind of like, you can think of it kind of like a skill play, where you have to time your skill very accurately. I'm not sure how accurate it is, as hands-on gameplay is out of my reach, but you have to use some sort of skill maneuver to use the skill in the hold mode to apply the focused impression, and that will get you a lot more value for your elemental skill and very good cryo application. Moving on to the burst, her burst is very good. Charlotte creates a newsflash field that deals AoE cryo damage and restores HP for all nearby party members based on Charlotte's attack, which is kind of a burst of healing and a burst of cryo damage. But then we have an on-field active newsflash field, which, while the ability is active, the cameras will deal cryo damage at intervals to the opponents within its AoE, so you'll just have some constant application of cryo damage, and then at the same time you'll have continuously restore HP to the active characters within the AoE based on Charlotte's attack. You can kind of think of this ultimate very similar to a combination between Jean's ultimate and Diona's ultimate, just with a bit faster cryo application, as I've seen the ultimate in usage, and it is quite frequent cryo application and quite frequent damage, which is quite good for the short duration of 4 seconds. Now, taking a look at the numbers, it does have a 20-second cooldown, 4-second duration, but the energy cost is the big one. It's 80 energy cost. Now, that is quite a lot, so it is encouraged to run a fair bit of energy recharge. As for the actual values of the damage and healing, well, as you'd expect, it's nothing too crazy, as it's a bit more of a supportive unit, but you're still going to get some decent damage values, and obviously the healing is pretty nasty, as you'll probably be able to full heal your team with just one elemental burst usage. Now, onto the passives. Moment of Impact is the first one, and then when opponents are marked by focused impression are defeated, so that is the skill-based elemental skill usage, the Framing Freezing Point composition cooldown, which is your elemental skill cooldown, will be decreased by 2 seconds. This cooldown decrease can be triggered 4 times every 12 seconds. So killing opponents with the mark of focused impression is going to lower the cooldown, make it a bit more frequent. It's kind of cool, kind of it's not that great. Onto the second passive, Diversified Investigation. When the party contains 1, 2, or 3 Fontanians other than Charlotte herself, she will gain 5, 10, or 15% healing bonus. Pretty useful. But then the other part of it is when the party contains 1, 2, or 3 non-Fontanian characters, Charlotte will gain 5, 10, and then 15 cryo damage bonus. This passive is pretty good. Mostly going to be using the latter part of it as the former. Maybe not so useful, the healing bonus. Her healing is pretty high as it is, but regardless, no matter how many characters you have in it, you'll be getting a bonus in one way or another, whether it's Fontanian or the other one. You can have a mixture of both of them. If you have two non-Fontanians, you'll get 10%, and then one Fontanian, you'll get one set of the healing bonus. So you can kind of mix and match. This passive is kind of null and void. It's just small bonuses in a small area. And then last passive, this one, I'm going to read it out. After activating the special analysis zoom lens, Charlotte's framing, freezing point, composition, hold mode cannot trigger its original effects, but instead enables her to take photos in a rather unique manner. This has no effect on gameplay. I believe, I haven't seen any gameplay of it, but I believe this will just allow you to take pictures with Charlotte as a character using her camera. I'm not exactly sure, but it doesn't affect gameplay in any way, so don't pay it too much mind. And taking a look at Charlotte's standalone, no constellations, no gears, no weapons, actually a very decent unit to get. Now, the big reason for this is going to be that cryo application that we can get from the elemental skill Focused Impression, which is going to be cryo application on a 1.5 second interval for a duration of 12 seconds with a cooldown of 12 seconds. So, or rather, sorry, 18 seconds, my apologies there. So very good cryo application for the duration of just the hold skill. You combo that with the ultimate, which is going to have some very high frequency cryo application for a 4-second duration. You're going to be able to get a lot of cryo application for whatever kind of team comps you're going to be running, be it, you know, something like a melt team with some pyro characters or perma-freeze. You're going to be able to get some good value there. But on top of that, obviously, she scales with attack percentage, and much like Jean is a healer that scales with attack percentage, you're going to be doing some naturally high damage. Just attack percent characters tend to do that. And then on top of that, again, Charlotte is also a healer with some pretty nasty damage and healing potential. So overall, a decent 4-star to get. I wouldn't doubt it that she can rival Jean in terms of that attack percentage healer role. So I would recommend getting this character, or if you happen to get her, try to build her. She's pretty good in my opinion. But constellations are, well, I would say decent for this character. Let's get into them. Taking a look at Constellation 1, a need to verify facts after her elemental burst is used and heals a character. It will mark them with verification, which will heal them once every 2 seconds for 80% of Charlotte's attack. This lasts 6 seconds. You can get a total of 3 heals from it. And this is a pretty good constellation. The reason for it is it just kind of innately boosts the value of her burst universally, as we have to remember her burst does have a party-wide heal upon casting, and from my understanding, that this constellation will trigger upon that party-wide heal, and then obviously subsequently only the active character is getting healed from the ultimate, so the active character is being kept up like absolutely no tomorrow with the amount of healing coming through to them with C1. So very good constellation. Constellation 2, a duty to pursue truth when using her elemental skill. When the camera hits 1, 2, or 3 or more opponents, Charlotte's own attack will be increased by 10, 20, or 30%, further increasing her scaling. Pretty good constellation, just massive bonuses from that one. Constellation 4, a responsibility to oversee. When her elemental burst hits an opponent marked by Snappy Silhouette or Focused Impression, which is from the elemental skill, it will deal 10% more damage and restore 2 energy to Charlotte. This restoration can be triggered 5 times every 20 seconds, which is about the maximum amount of times that I believe the elemental burst hits. So if you use her elemental skill and then straight after that use her elemental burst, it'll pretty much regenerate a 10 energy back straight away, which is pretty good. And then lastly, C6, the summation of interest. When the active character's normal and charge attack hits an opponent marked by her elemental skill's Focused Impression, again that skill-based marking, the Monsieur Verite, which I believe is the camera, will initiate a coordinated attack that deals 180% of Charlotte's attack as AoE cryo damage, and then also heals the active character within that AoE for 42% of Charlotte's attack. This effect can be triggered once every 6 seconds, and both damage and healing dealt in this way will be considered as having been done by Charlotte's elemental burst. A very long constellation, but it does have that coordinated attack, and if I know anything about coordinated attacks from Mrs. Yelan, I know that coordinated attacks are very powerful, and for a 4-star character, this is a very good Constellation 6, so if you do manage to get to this, I would recommend building Charlotte. For just general usage, it's pretty good, as it's also only reliant on the elemental skill. There's no elemental burst requirements for this C6, so the elemental skill requirement there, and then you'll be able to get some coordinated attacks. It's pretty good. I'm rambling now. The constellations are all high value, and there's not a single one that I think is actually in any way bad. So it's kind of hard to recommend. Whatever constellation level you get to, there's always better things to get higher up. But if I was to recommend one, C6, go for C6. But again, 4-star character, not too difficult to get, and you can get them on the standard banner after their release. Moving on to the weapons, this is where we get a bit kind of up in the air about what's actually good for her, as I wouldn't say there's any weapon that is intrinsically amazing for her. Specifically out of the 5-star category, no weapon here is phenomenal. There's just very good choices. If you want a bit of scaling, Memory of Dust is going to be able to give you that attack percent scaling. If you want some sort of, boosting or supportive weapon, maybe go for the 1,000 Floating Dreams. But generally speaking, the one thing that I will say is don't use the Jade Falls Splendor or the Everlasting Moonglow on her. Those two are just healing weapons. The other ones you might be able to find a bit of value if you use the character as main DPS or something along those lines. But the Jade Falls Splendor and the Everlasting Moonglow don't use in any way. Out of the 5 stars, it's kind of up in the air. But for the 4 stars, which is where I actually think one of her best in slot weapons will be, I think the 4 stars are pretty good. And the first one I'm going to recommend is going to be the Favonius Codex. How could I not recommend anything from the Favonius series? These weapons are crazy. And mainly speaking, it's because of the energy recharge substat. So it's got 45.9% energy recharge as a substat, 509 base attack, and obviously the refinement or the ability is crit hits have a small chance to generate elemental particles, which regenerate more energy. Overall, you cannot go wrong with the Favonius Codex. You have a small bit of crit rate on the character, and her elemental skill will be proccing the ability quite frequently, at least 2 times per elemental skill usage. So overall, Favonius Codex, I believe, will be one of her best in slots, just for her role as a support healer. But going further, another one that might be very good is actually the Flowing Purity, which is the craftable weapon from the Fontaine region, so it's also quite easy to get to Refinement 5, obviously only if you have the materials for it. But this weapon is going to be a 564 base attack weapon with 27.6% attack percentage as the substat, and then the ability, when you use the elemental skill, all elemental damage bonus will be increased by 16% at Refinement 5, and then at a bond of life will be created. Then when you heal that bond, you'll get a bit more elemental damage bonus. This one, it's just because it's easy to get attack percentage scaling, so your scaling itself will increase a fair bit, and then elemental damage bonus. So it's a decent choice if you have it. If you don't want to invest the resources into this, there's absolutely no need. The Favonius Codex will carry you all the way through it. And then the third option, as I always like recommending 3 different catalysts, this one is just going to be for the players who have it. I do apologize for the players who weren't playing at the time to get this, but the Oath's Sworn Eye is going to be a pretty good choice for her. Now, for those who don't know how you got this one, it was a limited time event during the Enkanomiya patches, I believe it was, and you were able to do an event and get this weapon to R5. Now, if you do have this at R5, it's a pretty good weapon, 564 base attack with 27.6% attack percentage as substat, and then the ability is mainly where it's at with the increased energy recharge by 48% for 10 seconds after using an elemental skill. Essentially, you get the best of both worlds with massive energy recharge, pretty decent attack percentage, and generally speaking, good base attack. So overall, it's going to be a great weapon if you do have it. My apologies if you do not have it. For weapons, like I said, 5 stars, I wouldn't recommend, as there's no crazy weapon for her in the 5-star category. But as for 4 stars, if you have the Favonius Codex at R5, I think it's going to be one of her best in slots. And other than that, pretty much use any attack percentage or energy recharge weapon, as she has a very high energy cost ultimate. Now, Artifacts is a pretty simple and straightforward one, at least in my mind. The easiest choice if you want to use the character for, 50-50 reasons, Golden Trope is going to be the one to go for. Her skill, as we've established with Focused Impression mode activated, you have a 1.5 second interval cryo damage instance, and Golden Trope increases elemental skill damage by a very large margin. And because Charlotte will also spend a lot of her time off field, just kind of with that cryo application happening, you're getting the full bonus from the Golden Trope damage boost. But that is just damage boost. Similar to Farina, I'm also going to recommend Tenacity of the Millilith. Now, you might be thinking, well, it's HP% on the 2 set. That's not going to provide any bonuses to Charlotte. That is true. It won't provide any bonuses to Charlotte, but if you don't have a tenacity applicator in your party, so if you don't have a Zhongli, if you don't have a Farina, or whoever you want to use it, or you want to apply it, Charlotte is actually a very, very good character for it, as she has a 12-second duration dot that she can put on enemies with a 1.5-second damage interval on the skill. Again, tenacity thrives from skill frequency of attacks. And so Charlotte can do that quite well, and it is a 20% attack boost to the active character, or I believe the whole party, with tenacity. So just having anyone in the party applied is very good, and Charlotte can do it just fine. That is going to be my two primary recommendations for Charlotte. Tenacity if you have nobody else in the party to do it, and Golden Trope if you kind of want an easy answer. Other than that, it really comes down to what other good pieces you have. If you want to go for double 2-piece attack percentage, that's fine. If you want to go for cryo damage, that's also fine in some ways. But generally speaking, there's no like mega overpowered super juicer kind of artifact set for her. There's really nothing like that. So Golden Trope or Tenacity will do just fine, but you know, attack percentage is also pretty good. And lastly, kind of team compositions and kind of how you would use the character. Well, as we've established, Charlotte is this. She's a cryo catalyst character with a very good cryo application, attack scaling healer. That is what she is easily described as, and with that, she kind of fits almost anywhere that you can use the cryo application portion of her kit. If you want to do a pseudo hyper melt team, then you'll be able to do that with Charlotte, as the frequency of her cryo application is 1.5-second intervals, and then with her burst up, you'll be able to have that a lot more frequently. Or if you want to run her in some sort of pseudo perma-freeze team with Farina or any other Hydra character, you'll also be able to do that. But we also have to take into consideration that she, by herself, is a powerhouse of a unit in terms of damage. Attack percent scaling characters tend to have that effect. If you take a look at Jean, she's relevant to this day still, mainly due to the amount of damage that she can bust out just by using her skill and elemental burst. The raw hits that she provides is incredible, and she even had a new composition, the whole Sunfire team comp, established, pseudo recently. So Charlotte kind of falls under that same umbrella that Jean does. Attack percent scaling healers are incredibly powerful, so you can kind of chuck Charlotte in anywhere, but mainly she'll be used in permafreeze or some sort of melt team. You could also even use her as your superconduct triggerer, but that won't be as effective as you may think, as you already have that with certain characters. But regardless, I'm rambling. That's kind of going to be her team composition usage, but you can chuck her anywhere because she's also a healer. And that's going to be the Charlotte video. A little bit quicker than the Farina one, as there was a lot more simpler things in Charlotte's kit, but I hope it still came across cleanly and understandably. So if you guys did enjoy the guide, and if you enjoyed the video, thank you so much, and I hope you guys can like and sub to the video, or the channel, I guess. I'm messing this ending up, but regardless, hope you enjoyed. Catch you guys in the next guide.